Hi folks, hope you're enjoying and benefiting from our guitar lesson series. Remember, it's essential that you watch these lesson videos in order. Each lesson leads into the next, and you won't get the big picture if you skip any of the steps. Many of you have been searching for these answers for years. You might be tempted to jump ahead and look at lesson 24 because you're into the blues, but if you don't know your intervals and modes from lesson 12 and 17, you just ain't going to get it. Consider purchasing the 150-page official course handbook for $19.95 from our website at www.absolutelyunderstandguitar.com. You'll find that link multiple places here on our YouTube channel. Each of the 32 video lessons has a corresponding printable page that you can view to help with review and memorization. All of the charts and graphs I create in the videos are reprinted there. The package also includes our amazing chord, scale, and arpeggio encyclopedia containing most every useful finger pattern known to man. Reserve your copy today. If you like what you're learning here, tell all your friends and like and subscribe to our channel. So enjoy this lesson and continue on, and you will absolutely understand guitar.
Hi, welcome back to Absolutely Understand Guitar. I'm your host, Scotty West. Today we're going to finish up our section on playing chords. Later in the series we'll be going into chord theory in depth, but for now this will be enough to get you started playing songs. We'll also finish up our discussion on how to practice chords and some information about strumming and picking them. This is lesson 6, so get your book out and find page 6. As always, make sure you're reviewing your previous lessons. Okay? Here we go. Hi, how you doing? Welcome back. Today we're going to finish up our discussion on chords. We've spent a couple of hours on chords so far. We learned a lot of facts about how chords are structured and how to play them and all. But today, one of the first things I want to talk about is a methodology for practicing chords. You know some things about chords now, but the other side of that is you've got to get good at playing them. Some of the things we mentioned last time are when it comes to mastering chords, you have several different things that you have to be able to do. You have to be able to play the chords. You have to be able to get there instantly, pretty much just in the snap of a finger. Your fingers have to be there. You also have to know the names of those chords too. That's what we talked a lot about last time, the chord names. And the way to get better and better at these, of course, is to practice. And I have a special little methodology that I'll show you about practicing. Let's quickly review this up on the board here, what we left off with last time. It's what I call the sad truth about playing chords. And the notion is that playing the chord is really the easy part. And you're playing these big ugly chords going, this is the easy part? What's the hard part? Well, I'm sure you'll agree that switching from chord to chord in the song with the beat, keeping track of the rhythm as you go, is the actual problem that you need to be able to solve. So there's a way to practice to actually maximize your ability to do that. It involves practicing chords in pairs. Remember, you have that whole list of chords that you have to master. How are you going to work on all those chords? Well, I always say pick 2 of them at any given point while you're practicing, and just practice going back and forth between those 2 chords. And hopefully each time you go back and forth, you begin to pick up a little more speed, and your fingers remember where to go, and you can get there a little bit faster. So practice chords in pairs, back and forth every 4 beats. Why 4 beats? Well, because 80% of the songs you've ever heard are counted in repeating patterns of 4 beats. When we look at our drum machine in a few minutes, we'll review that stuff. Try to keep this up for about 5 minutes. It doesn't matter whether you can play that chord a few times. In order for it to be musically useful to you in your playing, you know, the average song is 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 minutes long, so you've got to make sure that you have the strength and coordination in your hands to be able to play for that long. Remember, if you're going to go out and be in a band and play gigs, you're going to have to play for several hours sometimes. And most people's, particularly their left hand for right-handed people, the chording hand on the neck of the guitar, those muscles are not generally strong enough unless you actually physically exercise them and work on them. So that's what the 5-minute rule is all about. The next line here, with drums, is one of the most important lines in the entire thing. Remember, music without rhythm is only fooling yourself that you're playing the song. If you can't play it in time, you can't play it, period. And too many people just fool themselves into thinking that they're playing the song when they're really not. The only way, as far as I can tell, to really develop a stage-usable professional relationship with rhythm is to practice with some kind of timekeeper machine. In the old days, we had our boring old metronomes. Nowadays, we have these nice department store keyboards up here, and you're going to want to think of a way that you can get yourself one of these. They make practicing a lot more fun, and you're really absolutely dealing with the rhythm while you're practicing with one of these. The next line in the equation down here, slow as you need. We're going to show you how to use this timekeeper today. You don't want it going too fast. You want it right where you can control it and right where you can play at that speed, but you're challenging yourself just a little. Think ahead. Make sure you're not thinking about the chord you're playing. If you're thinking about the chord you're playing, it's too late. All musicians have to learn to force their mind ahead in the music. Think about the next chord that's coming up. That's the important thing. And then finally, make sure you listen to yourself, because ultimately, the proof of the pudding, as they say, is the sound that comes out of your guitar has to be good. Doesn't matter whether you think your fingers are in the right place or whatever. If the chord doesn't sound good, there's something wrong. Maybe you've put your fingers on the wrong fret, or maybe some of the strings have been deadened off somehow, and you need to always make sure that you're listening to yourself. As I mentioned before, a good way to do that is make sure whenever you sit down to practice that you have some kind of tape recorder, some kind of recording device, so that you can record yourself as you play. And then when you're done and you're putting the guitar away or washing the dishes or something, rewind that tape back and play it and listen to it. It's very illuminating for a lot of people. We often think we're playing better than we actually are, and that's one of the ways to tell. Okay, now some new information. Back to this line up here in our practice regimen with drums. Well, as we're saying, one of the most important things you need to develop rhythm is to work out with some kind of mechanical timekeeper. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about those. Down at the bottom of the page, you'll notice down here I wrote, get a timekeeper, because it's pointless to play without one. I don't mean absolutely pointless, but I'm suggesting that if you use this methodology to practice chords, you'll learn in half the time that other people will take to learn them. Then it may not be absolutely pointless. You may not be completely wasting your time by practicing it without a without a timekeeper, but you may be wasting half your time. You know what I mean? So I can't stress enough how important it is to get one of these. Lots of households have one of these floating around in there already, but if you don't, start thinking of a way that you can figure out how to get one. And I want to tell you a little bit about what to look for when you go thinking about getting a timekeeper too. The big question, as we've seen so many other times in music, the big word once again is satisfaction. So when it comes to picking a timekeeper for yourself, the first big question you have to ask yourself is, will it satisfy me? Meaning you. Nobody ever works with something that they don't enjoy doing, don't enjoy working with. The old metronome worked perfectly fine, but it was kind of boring, and nobody really had much fun practicing with metronomes. Now, particularly in the world of rock and roll, just by pushing a simple button, you can have a really flawless timekeeper, and it'll sound more like the drummer in the rock and roll band that you'd like to be in. So these, that's what's so nice about these. They're very satisfying. They're much more fun to practice with. So the big question when you're looking around for a timekeeper, make sure it's one that you're going to enjoy using. Now, there are a couple of sub-questions that you're going to ask yourself about that in order to determine whether it's something that you'll enjoy using. For example, the first question is, how does it sound? This is kind of a timbre question. Remember back to your 6 main areas of music, what timbre is about? It's about the actual sound quality that you're generating. How does it sound? If you get one that's too old or too cheap, it's not going to sound much like a human being playing the drums. It's going to sound more like a video game. I mean, you can go into a toy store and buy a little keyboard for like $15. But the chances are it won't sound much like a human playing the drums. It'll probably sound more like a video game. It'll probably be going like boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, 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 beep, and doesn't sound like much fun to play with. This one, and I'll tell you a little bit about this particular machine. that sounds reasonably like a human playing the drums, and that'll make it a lot more fun to practice with. So your first question is, how does it sound? Try to get something that's actually going to satisfy you in the way that it actually sounds. Second question, to find out whether the machine is going to satisfy yourself, is how many beat patterns does it have? So far this morning anyway, we're just listening to one of the different drum patterns in here. If I were you, and you'd like to get a machine that you're going to stick with and enjoy using, I would hold out for a machine that has somewhere in the vicinity of 100 different patterns in it. Because as you know, whenever you listen to any song you play, they don't always have the same drum stuff going on in them. Almost every song you play has a slightly different drum pattern to it. So, for example, this one that we're listening to right now is a pretty standard 4-beat rock and roll pattern. It's kind of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But there's some music that's counted in 3, like a waltz. And here's a waltz, number 46. Call up 46 on here, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So this is a pattern that's counted in 3. And now let me just play some other random ones so you can see. Here's number 45. I don't even know what this is going to be. This is a shuffle. 2, 3, 4. And you can probably think of some songs that you've heard that have a beat like this. Here's number 24. A little more aggressive, kind of a hard rock-ish kind of sound. Here's number 16. Almost sounds like disco, you know what I mean? But anyway, the more different beat patterns that you can have in your machine, the more likely it is that you will find a pattern that goes along with exactly the song you want to play. So I'd hold out for 100 different patterns. So get yourself a satisfying timekeeper. And the two questions you want to ask yourself: make sure it sounds pretty good, and make sure it's got 100 beat patterns in it. To buy a machine like that is going to involve a little bit of money, not a lot. I believe that you can find instruments that sound good and have 100 patterns in the $100 to $150 range. People go, gulp? You mean I'm supposed to spend that much money on an accessory to my playing? And I go, well, yes. But in the end, like I say, it'll be more fun, and if you spend your money right, you'll get a machine that will last for years, and you won't ever have to think about it again. It'll just be a done deal. And the model I'm currently recommending, Yamaha will be very happy to hear this, is, I'm always kind of researching this, and it's $19.99 right now. The models change every year. But this is a Yamaha PSR 79. And these are available in all department stores and toy stores, and I'm sure you can find them online too. This machine will retail for somewhere in the $100 to $150 range, and I'm just afraid if you spend much less than that on a new machine. Of course, remember, check out used machines too. You might be over at a friend of yours' house one day, and his kid's sister got one for Christmas 5 years ago, and it's just sitting over in the corner collecting dust. Offer $20 for it. You know what I mean? You might get yourself a real bargain, but they're just so valuable, I can't stress it enough. So that's it. Get yourself a timekeeper. It's pointless to play without one. Spend your money well and get one that you'll enjoy using, and then use it every time you practice, and you will learn to play the guitar in half the time that everybody else takes to do it. Okay, now, the whole reason we were talking about this is we're trying to learn how to play these chords. Remember, this was from 2 lessons ago where we actually learned all our different chord shapes, and we said you're going to have to master all these chords. You're also going to have to master them as bar chords, and you're also going to have to be able to get there like that in about a half a second. That's your challenge for the next 2 or 3 years. The methodology for getting there is right here, what we just reviewed a few moments ago. But I want to show you a little bit more about how to use your timekeeper to count in 4. And that's what we're going to be looking at over here, and find ways of continually challenging yourself to play a little bit faster. Now, here's my guitar, and let's say I've picked 2 chords that I want to practice. These are chords that many of you will already know. A C major chord in the C form. You could look back at your chord chart if you want to. And a G major chord in the G form. Now let's say I've never played these chords before and I'm trying to learn how to play them and practice them. As we said, you want to practice them in pairs. So you focused on those 2 chords and you're just going to keep going back and forth between them. And each time you do that, hopefully you'll pick up some speed. Now, you have to be able to do that within the rhythmic content of the song, too. That's where your drum machine comes in. So, for example, if I put this... Oh, I don't want to use that pattern, actually. I'll go to 08 here. Now, this is a very standard kind of 4-beat drum pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got to be able to switch these chords within that time frame, within that rhythmic content right there. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways that I can do this to challenge myself a little more. For example, what you want to do in the beginning is you want to slow the tempo of your beat way down. There's no harm in playing a song too slow as long as all the rhythmic parts fall into the proper place. So in many ways, what you do with every song you play is you just start off by playing it a little bit slow. And now, in the context of my practicing these 2 chords, I might slow it down. And then if we can look over here for a moment, you might recognize this column of different symbols over here. Those of you who've had any kind of musical training before, many of you won't, and we're going to be talking about notation soon. But if you look at these symbols, that's what's called a whole note, and that's what's called a half note, and that's what's called a quarter note, and an eighth note, and a 16th note. That's going to relate to how we're strumming these different chords and challenging ourselves to play faster and faster. A whole note, this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but for now, let me suggest that a whole note lasts for 4 beats. So if I was to strum a whole note, 3, 4, like right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. I would hold on to that chord for the whole 4 beats and then strum it again when beat number 1 comes around again. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the way I might use that to practice is, here I am, I'm starting this brand new chord that I've never played before. I'm going to start, first of all, with the tempo, the speed of my drum machine set really low. 2, 3, 4. Then what I'm going to do is, if you see this right here, I'm going to put a circle around beat number 1 here. And I'm going to suggest that you strum on beat number 1, on, say, your C chord. And you don't have to do anything else until beat number 1 comes around again. And at that point, that's where you're going to switch the chord to the G chord. Right at that point, you've got to make sure that your G chord is in place by the time you get back to beat number 1 again. So for each 4 beats, you're going to be playing 1 chord. So that would be something like this. On beat number 1, I'm going to play the C, and then you can bail out right after that if you want, and begin during this whole 4-beat period here to form the G chord so that you're all ready to strum the G chord when beat number 1 comes around again. That would be something like this. 2, 3, 4. Okay, I strum the C chord to, now I bail out 3, 4, so that by the time beat number 1 comes around again, 3, 4, 1, I'm on the new chord. And what I keep just doing is giving myself plenty of time to get my fingers over there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And I just keep doing that for 5 minutes if I can, or until I begin to suspect that, oh, well, I can handle this now, and I need to challenge myself a little more. You see, the beauty of this is you're giving yourself a time limit by which point your fingers have to be in place. When that beat number 1 comes back around again, your fingers have to be there. That's the beauty of practicing with a timekeeper. You're giving yourself an absolute time limit by which time your fingers have to be there. People who don't practice that way, they la-di-da, sort of let their fingers just get there whenever they feel like it, and that just really slows your progress down. Now, let's say you've been practicing for a while at this speed, strumming your whole notes like that, and you begin to suspect that, well, I can do this now. I want to challenge myself a little more. There's two ways you can challenge yourself more. One thing you could do is simply speed up your timekeeper. So if I was successfully doing it at this speed, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, it might be time for me to challenge myself by speeding the machine up a little. So I might speed the machine up to there, and now the same 4 beats, but they're coming at me a little faster. Now I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. When I've done that and I'm getting that down, I could speed the machine up even faster than that. But there's another way that you can challenge yourself without even changing the speed of the machine. What if I was back here at this slower speed again, and I wanted to challenge myself a little more? Well, another way I could do it would be to start strumming the chord at a different rate. Rather than strumming it once every 4 beats, I will strum it twice. I will strum each chord twice, and I'll do it every 2 beats. So here, I'm going to be strumming on beat number 1, but I'm also going to be strumming again on beat number 3. Now, what that means is I am not going to be able to let go of this chord so early to begin forming the next chord. Here, I was able to bail. I was able to let go of that previous chord right there, giving me 4 nice long beats in order to play the new chord. Now, since I have to hold on to this chord till after beat number 3, I no longer have 4 beats to form the chord. I only have 2 beats to form the new chord. So I've cut that time limit in half. That would be something like this. Now, if I was strumming whole notes, it would be 1, 2, and I got all this time, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. But if I'm going to strum half notes, I'm going to be strumming each chord a second time on the 3rd beat, which cuts the amount of time I have to form the new chord in half. Now I'm going to be doing something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. I can't bail till after the 3rd beat and form the new chord. 2, 3. Now I practice it that way for a while, and I begin to feel as though I've got that happening fairly well. I can challenge myself even more by then beginning to strum at actually on each beat. In this column here, now we're doing quarter notes, and we're going to strum on beat number 1, beat number 2, beat number 3, and beat number 4. Strum each chord 4 times. That means I can't bail out and start forming the next chord until right here, after the 4th beat. And what that means is I only have 1 beat in which to actually form that new chord, and that's going to make it much more challenging for me to get my fingers there in time. So now I'm doing this. I'm strumming on each beat. I'm strumming each chord 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now switch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now switch. Now I only have 1 beat to form the new chord. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you see, without even varying the speed of the timekeeper, I'm challenging myself to form those chords faster and faster by simply cutting my time limit down further and further. But we're not done yet. The next level is you can actually go to the half beat. If my beats are going 1, 2, 3, 4, then I can begin to use the syllable and plug it in between each one of the beat numbers to indicate where the half beats would be. So that would be like this. Here's the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I stick the ands in between, and it's like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And what I'm going to be doing here is strumming on each one of these half beats. I'm going to strum each chord 8 times. I'm going to have to hold on to that chord till after the second half of the 4th beat. And I'm not going to be able to leave to form that new chord until right here. This is where you're beginning to get into that split second thing that I was talking about last week. In the end, you've got to be able to get from one chord to the next in a split second, like a half a beat. In a minute, we're going to go down to the quarter beat level beyond that. And So here's strumming on the beat again, the previous quarter note one up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now to get the half beats, many times what I start doing is notice how I'm strumming all of these with downstrokes with my pick. 3, 4, 1. But also notice that my hand is actually doing an upstroke just to get ready to do the next downstroke. To play on the half beat, I'm going to start making contact with the strings on these upstrokes. So that would be like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So now I can't look where I have to actually switch. And 1. Now I only have a half a beat. 3 and 4 and switch. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and switch. 1 and I only have a half a beat to form the new chord. That's a tiny, that's that split second thing I was talking about, but we're not done yet. You can still go one more level beyond that to the quarter beat, which now we've got the ones, the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, we've got the ands in between, and then what you try to do is stick another syllable in between each of those. So now we were going 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we went to the half beat, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and the quarter beat would be like this. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Each beat is being divided into 4 sub-units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And they say the best way is to use those syllables 1 E and a. That way your numbers are still where they are, your ands are still where they are, and you're sticking in an E and an on either side of it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E. Your hand's going like this. 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4. Now to switch the chords, since you're strumming on each quarter beat, 4 strokes for each beat. You know, getting so small I can't even write them here. That now you've got just the tiniest little fraction of time to get from that C chord to that G chord. You have 1/4 of one beat. That would be like this. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and switch. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and switch. 1 the 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and switch. 1 E and a 2 E and practice it that way till you feel as though that you need a new challenge and you need to play even faster. Then really you could try to go to the next speed, but I think that would be superhumanly fast. But then that's when you might consider your other variable, which is raising the speed of your timekeeper too. So now if you're at this tempo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're strumming at the quarter beat, your hand's going like this. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a da 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 da, and it's like, look at how fast my fingers are forming that new chord. The good news is most songs are not strummed at that ultimate quarter beat speed down there. So you won't really have to worry about going to that extreme speed too often. That's the good news. The bad news is most songs are strummed at the previous level right there, the half beat level. So you're at least going to have to master getting up to your half beats, which at this tempo would be 2 and 3 and 4 and down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. So you'd be going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Switch 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4. Switch 1. So that's what that's all about. Now, let me mention another thing. Some of you, a lot of my students these days here in the end of the 1990s are into styles of music like heavy metal and particularly some very thrashy stuff, Slayer and Metallica and some of these guys. And everybody wants to play these songs. People don't understand how hard those guys work in order to play music that's superhumanly fast like that. And the only way to get there is to work out with a mechanical timekeeper. All you do then is you're just speeding that machine up to these superhuman realms of speed, and it requires hours and hours of practice. Those guys, the only way I can figure it, I don't really necessarily know much about them, the only way I can figure it is ever since they were teenagers, they locked themselves in a room several hours a day with a drum machine and just kept practicing and just kept cranking the speed up faster and faster. A lot of you like Metallica, but remember, if you can't play it in time, you can't play it, period. And so that's where I say this is going to turn out to be your absolute best friend if you ever want to really become a real player of music. No matter what style it is, you've got to master rhythm. And that's the best way I ever found to do it, is to work with a mechanical timekeeper. And that's it. So just quickly to review that whole concept, the ways to challenge yourself more and more: get your drum machine going. First start strumming once for every 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Gives you plenty of time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Then start going every 2 beats. Strum each chord twice. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Then on every beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Then every half beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2. Then every quarter beat. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4. And you eventually need to get to where you are doing that with all of the chords on this sheet here. Remember, this is your basic vocabulary of chords that you're trying to master. You've got to get every one of these down. I don't care what style of music you're playing. This is a very basic chord vocabulary. Everything from folk music to heavy metal. You're going to bump into essentially every single one of these chords somewhere along the line. So your grunt work for the next 2-3 years is to master all these. But not only that, you've got to master them all as bar chords. Remember, the bar is that finger that goes all the way across the neck. But the methodology would still be exactly the same. For example, one last time I'll show you, and maybe I'm going to practice this G chord in the E form right there with my bar on the 3rd fret. The process would be the same. Let's say I'm going to go from C in the C form to this G in the E form as a bar chord shaped like that. The process would still be the same. These are hard chords to play. These are going to be the ones that are going to be the most challenging to get them to sound good and to be able to keep time and get your fingers there in time. Doesn't matter. You've got to make it happen. I can't stress that enough. So now I'm strumming the C chord on the downbeat on 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and I have to even get that big ugly bar chord in place by the time that next beat comes around. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then, after I feel good about that, I start strumming it every 2 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Then on every beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So you see I'm practicing bar chords the same way I practice open tuning chords. Then every half beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. See, I can do it. I can get my fingers there. I remember there was a time when I didn't think I'd ever be able to do that. I can go to the quarter beat. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2. And like I said, you've got to get that whole chord vocabulary down at that speed and at that rate right there. And That's your main thing. That the other thing, just to remind you of, on any given day when you sit down to play your guitar, remember there's two things you want to do. You want to play. You want to have a good time. You want to have some fun. That's what all this is all about. But remember, you want to spend a little bit of each day working too. You want to play and you want to practice. A lot of people just get the practicing out of the way right in the beginning. If you've got a half an hour to spend playing your guitar, or say an hour on any given day, for the first 5, 10, 15, however long you can stand it, try to get the grunt work out of the way. And remember, one of the first grunt work exercises that we learned about is your chromatic scales, your individual notes. It's a very good warm-up exercise on any given day, exercising those 4 fingers. You can actually do that with a timekeeper on, too. Even your scales like this have to be played in time. Those were quarter beats. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. And at that, and of course chromatic scales further up the neck with your finger shifts, Do this for 5 or 10 minutes just to wake your fingers up. And do that for 5 or 10 minutes. Then go into practicing your chords. Try a new combination of chords that you've never played before for like 5, 10 minutes. Pick 2 or 3 different combinations. Practice them for 5 minutes. Review some of the ones you did. So, maybe you're into practicing now for 20 minutes or a half an hour. The more you can do it, the faster you'll become a real player. Then, by all means, go and have fun. Work on the songs that you're playing and stuff. You got to have a good time too. But don't ignore that grunt work. It's the old delayed gratification thing. It's like if you put the grunt work in the beginning, the fun part will come that much. The fun part will come that much sooner to you. Okay, that's it. Now you have a really good working kind of ability at this point to play chords and control chords. In the next couple of lessons, we're going to be talking about how to read music a little bit, just for now, just enough so that we can maybe get you into some songbooks or into some tablature so that you'll actually be able to play some songs. And that's when you can really begin to have some fun. I know all the stuff that we've been doing so far has been, a little bit technically oriented and all. But remember, in order to play music, you got to know how to play your instrument first. A lot of people make that mistake. They go right to playing songs before they really understand how their instrument works at all. And most people who play that way just get bored with themselves when the initial novelty phase is over in a year or two, and they just wind up giving up their instrument. If you want to play for the rest of your life, you've got to be a real player. That's the only way you're going to satisfy yourself. So you got to put that grunt work in. Okay, now I want to completely change the subject here for the rest of this show. We've talked an awful lot about what a right-handed person would do with their left hand on the guitar. I know it's so hard for you left-handed people. I'll stick this in as a matter of fact. Maybe I should have said this earlier, but many left-handed people who want to play the guitar actually make the decision to play the guitar right-handed. May seem a little awkward at first, but most of the people who play the guitar that way, once you get used to it, you really don't notice any real problem with it. And the other thing is, if you try to play the guitar left-handed, like you try to switch everything over to the other side, you're going to have so many problems. First of all, it's going to be difficult for you to find a left-handed instrument. When I walk into the average music store, there's 50 guitars hanging on the wall. 1 or 2 of them is a left-handed guitar. Sometimes none of them are. So you're going to have trouble buying yourself a left-handed instrument, first of all. And second of all, when you go to read all your finger charts and everything, they're all written for right-handed people. Now, I know that's a terrible burden for you left-handed people, but just a suggestion, you might try to just tough it out and learn to play the guitar right-handed. It'll save you a lot of grief. By all means, if you want to go the other way, that's fine too, but then you've got to develop an ability to flip all the finger charts around in your mind, and you've got to find yourself an instrument. That can be tough. Now, the subject I want to go on to today is, back to the right-handed orientation here, we've been talking pretty much so far about what you do with your left hand on the neck of the guitar. We've talked very little about what you do with your right hand technique, which is actually executing the stuff on the instrument here. We've talked a lot about what you do with these fingers up here on the neck, but we haven't talked much about how to actually articulate the strings down here. We did mention that when we were talking about chromatic scales, we mentioned that one of the main cardinal rules to understand about moving this hand is that you want to utilize both your downstrokes and your upstrokes, particularly if you want any speed, if you want to develop any speed as a guitarist, which I know many of you do. A lot of people, their natural inclination is just to pick on the downstrokes. I've noticed through my 15 years of teaching that every now and then, like 1 out of 50 people, their natural inclination is to pick with all upstrokes. Truth of the matter is, if you ever want to develop any speed playing your instrument, you have to be able to use your pick in both directions, down and up. And you want to get used to doing this absolutely regularly. You don't want to find yourself doing 2 downstrokes and then an upstroke and then 2 downstrokes and an upstroke. You'll just stumble all over yourself. The only way to really develop, a reasonable control of rhythm with your picking hand is to utilize your strokes in both directions. When you're playing slowly, like if I was doing this, I could easily use just downstrokes. But when I start getting faster and faster, these are those quarter beat things again. If I don't utilize my downstrokes and my upstrokes, I would never be able to play that fast if I was just doing downstrokes or just doing upstrokes. The only way for me to get any speed is to practice with a timekeeper, loosen my hand up, and learn to control my pick in both directions. Now, so we were saying when you practice your chromatic scales, you've got to get that down and up picking orientation going. Now, that's all we've mentioned about it so far, is how to do that stuff when you're playing individual notes. But our discussion for the last few lessons has been all about chords. And when you're strumming chords, the same kind of logic applies. You need to be able to control your strumming with your hand going in both directions, not only your downstrokes, but your upstrokes as well. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is how to strum chords. I'm not going to be able to tell you every last thing about this subject once again for now. In many ways, strumming any particular song that you play it requires experience and familiarity with how strumming works. If you indeed have a private teacher that you're working with, or friends that maybe play the guitar better than you, they can very often help you in specific songs learning how to strum them. Just like every song might have a slightly different beat pattern, every song also has a slightly different way in which you actually strum the chords. And it's beyond the scope of this program for me to tell you every last thing about that. Many of you, rhythm is something that many of you have picked up almost intuitively over the course of your lives. We live in a rather exciting age as musicians. We live in the age of recorded music. Hasn't been all that long that we could say that. When did the average household start having recorded music in it? When the first record players, and then we're into radio and radio stations, and now we've got cassettes and CDs, and if you want, you can have music on around you all day long. And the mere act of listening to music, very often we pick up a bunch of stuff about how music works. And a lot of us already have a pretty good intuitive control of how rhythm works. So many people, the whole strumming thing comes to them rather naturally, Other people are not like that at all. I have a couple of students right now that are having so much trouble controlling their rhythm and being able to strum. And as I said, I won't be able to tell you every last thing about this. Taking this video series as you are does not necessarily mean that you're not going to also need some private lessons, or you're not going to need to work out with friends of yours and stuff, and particularly working out with a drum machine and everything. But I'm going to try today to tell you the basic stuff about how your right hand works. So what we're actually going to be talking about is strumming patterns. The first thing you want to know is every song you play has a strumming pattern. I'm not saying that every song has an absolutely unique strumming patterns. If you listen, I'm sure you've heard that many songs are strummed about the same way. Let me suggest that in rock and roll guitar, that maybe there's 20 different common strumming patterns, and any given song you play, the people are strumming it one of those 20 ways, or something like that. And you need to figure out which of those patterns is being used and how to actually articulate that yourself. How do you basically strum on the guitar? As I mentioned before, it has a lot to do with the same way you pick. The first thing you want to realize is, with some exceptions, but not many, you're working in a down/up, absolutely regularly type of orientation like that. Your hand is going just very regularly down and up like that. So you're strumming chords. You got your beat machine on. Let's go back to that same C chord to G chord. So now you're strumming this chord. And let's say we're at the half beat rate from that other chart. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. Now notice how my hand is going back and forth absolutely regularly like that. And I'm strumming the chords. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 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 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and... The only problem with that is if that's all we did, if we just strummed like that all the time, that would be pretty monotonous, wouldn't it? Isn't there just a really horrible kind of regularity to hearing chords like that? That'd be kind of boring to strum it like that. Most of the time, what we realize is that we hear chords played at different durations of time, so that it doesn't get so monotonous. So you might hear a strumming pattern that sounds something like this. Did you notice that there isn't always the same amount of distance between each of those strums? We have longer held chords and we have shorter held chords. Like the pattern I was just doing was kind of like this. Long, short, long, short, 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 long, da. Or I always kind of use the old Morse code thing. It's kind of like da, did, 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 da, did. Now, that adds interest to your strumming. How do you actually manage to accomplish that when you play? There's a big misconception about the way you do that. A lot of people think that in order to articulate strumming patterns like that, that your hand, as you strum, actually moves at different rates. Like something like long, short, 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 long, short, long. Like that I might move my hand and then pause it and then make it go faster when the short ones are there. The thing is, if you strum that way, you probably will not be able to keep a very steady beat. You'll keep stumbling over yourself and tripping over yourself. And what you're going to find out in a minute is that's not the way you strum these patterns at all. It's not a matter of your hand stopping and starting and moving at different rates, because your brain's ability to fire the nerves in your arm and get the thing moving at those precise time intervals like that, it's much more difficult than for your mind to fire those nerves and get those muscles moving in a very regular back and forth thing. You have to have this kind of regular back and forth thing in order to keep a very steady beat. I always say, when it comes to strumming patterns, that you want to have this real down-up orientation, because I always say your hand is your clock. You want to think, no matter how articulated the strumming pattern you're doing is, you want to think of your hand as like the pendulum on a clock, just going very regularly back and forth with the beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So how do we reconcile those two apparently opposite concepts? One, that your hand has to go absolutely regularly, but at the same time, we don't want our beats to be monotonous. We need this da, dit, da, dit, 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 da, dit, da, this kind of, changing, shaking things up a little to add interest. How do you reconcile those two things? Well, the answer is, interestingly enough, that in 99.9% of the strumming patterns you'll ever do, your hand is going absolutely back and forth regularly, but the interesting thing is you simply don't make contact with the pick on the strings with every single stroke. Sometimes your hand just whiffs right by the strings and you don't hit them, like this. My hand is still moving back and forth with the beat, but I'm not hitting the strings at all, am I, right now? Now I'll just hit the downstrokes. I'm not hitting the upstrokes. Now here's all of them again. Now here's just the upstrokes. They're kind of in between the beat. They're on the ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and... Here's the downstrokes again. 2, 3, 4. They're right on the beat. Here's all of them again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and... Here's just the upstrokes again. And. Just as a matter of interest, if you're into reggae music, that's a lot of the secret of reggae music. That kind of strange beat that reggae has, you're really not playing on the beats. You're, in a way, it could be said you're playing the upstrokes in between the beats. Here I am playing the downstrokes on the beat. Now here's the upstrokes in between the beat. Sounds a little bit like reggae, huh? There's more to reggae than that too, but that's kind of the place where reggae rhythms start. Now, remember the strumming pattern I had going a couple of minutes ago, with the down, short, long, short, long, short, 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 long, short, long, short, short, short. You might have recognized that that's a pretty common strumming pattern. And I'm going to use that as an example to show you basically how all these strumming patterns work with this very regular back and forth orientation, but you're not always hitting the strings. You're only hitting the strings on certain of those strums. Now, take a look here, up here on the board right here. I have a measure's worth of beats written out across here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I also have the ands in between. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Notice this wavy line right here underneath there. That's kind of the direction that your pick is going in on any given beat. You always start off with a downstroke on beat number 1. So see that angle is going down like that to the point under the number 1. That's a downstroke. And then notice that your pick then goes up to get to the and in between. And then it goes back again on beat number 2. And then up again on the halfway point in between beat number 2 and beat number 3. And then down, up, all the way to the end of the measure. So in a 4-beat count like this, let me slow the tempo down to this a little too. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and my hand 2 and 3 and 4 and down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Each beat is actually a downstroke. Each half beat is actually the upstroke. Now remember that pattern I did a few minutes ago, which was long, short, long, short, 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 long, short, long, short, 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 long, short, long. Now notice this, my hand is still going back absolutely regularly, but I hit certain strokes and I missed certain strokes. Now I'll show you how I notate this. This is my own unique way of doing it. We'll talk later when we talk about notation about how actual guitar notation handles this. But the way I do it is I have these letters that I use. The letter D equals a downstroke, where you actually make contact with the strings. The letter U equals an upstroke that you actually make contact with. A black dot actually equals a missed stroke. And then sometimes I'll even put like an arrow through it like that to indicate that that's a missed upstroke with your pick right there. Now, let me show you how this long, short, 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 long, short, long, short, short, short pattern emerges out of this regular back and forth thing. Let's look up here. Right under the point of beat number 1, I write the letter D. What that means is you are going to make contact with your strings on your first downstroke. But interestingly enough, your very first upstroke, when your pick is going back up again, you miss the strings. So we put a black dot there. We could even draw the arrow through it like that to indicate a missed upstroke. And that's going to be your long, or your longish type of chord right there. Now, what we do next is we hit our very next downstroke like that, and we hit our very next upstroke. And that downstroke there is like the dit. That's like the short duration articulation. And then down, down, up. And then we have a missed downstroke. And if you have any trouble with this at all, this is where it's going to be right here. This is going to like drive you crazy. Down, down, up. And then you hit your next up, down, up, down, up, up, down, up, down, down, up, up, down, up, down, down, up. So that would be like this. Now, so here's your orientation here. You've got your long, short. Now, since with this missed stroke, this is your next kind of long one right here. And then see, when you're hitting all these strokes at the end, these are your final up, down, up things. So let me show you what I mean. Here's my back and forth orientation. And it's like down, miss, down, up, miss, up, down, miss, down, up, miss, up, down, miss, down, up, miss, up, down, up. And that's all right out of this back and forth thing. Down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, miss, down, up, miss, up, down, miss, down, up, miss, up, down, up. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the lesson here. I'm gonna have to show you a little bit more of this next time. I wonder whether you got it from this. Take a look back at the tape there, and but we'll as soon as we get into the next lesson, we'll finish up just a little bit more on this strumming stuff there. But in the meantime, keep practicing that and keep looking over all your previous material. As you learn today with your timekeeper, make sure that you're working on your mastering all those chords using your timekeeping device. And try to practice this. You'll notice on page 6 of your book that you've got all of that stuff written out in there. Get your timekeeper going and start practicing your strumming. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that next time. Until then, I'm Scotty West. Have a great time, and we'll see you next time on Absolutely Understand Guitar, okay? Thanks. Bye-bye.